Good afternoon, everyone. So, our topic for today is NABH accreditation. So, let me start by giving you the definition. I'm sure many of you in this group may be already aware of what NABH is. The full form is National Accreditation Board for Hospitals and Healthcare Providers. So, what is this exactly? What do you really mean by NABH or NABH accreditation? So these are nothing but standards of accreditation, which are mainly focused towards two key words. One is quality, the other is safety of patient care. So these are the two key words, or rather the pillars on which the entire gamut of quality is based. Okay. So the purpose why NABH is established is basically to provide quality in patient care, right? So just to give you an example, um, we have heard of ISO standards of manufacturing, right? There are so many standards which are being followed to ensure quality of a particular product. So when we purchase a product as a consumer, we generally look for that ISO mark, isn't it? Similarly, for NABH, or rather for the healthcare sector, the hospital and the healthcare sector, the government's initiative to create some benchmark which can tell the world, which can tell the public or the community that our quality, our hospital is, cater to the quality and the safety standards of NABH. In order to give the public an information that we are close to a benchmark which is laid down by the nation is NABH. Now, I have a question here for the audience. Can somebody from the audience tell me what is the difference between regulation and accreditation? Are both of these the same or are they different? And is NABH a regulation or is it something different? We are saying it's an accreditation. So is it different? Can somebody answer this question? You can unmute yourselves for a minute and just answer that for me. Anybody? Nobody wants to attempt that? All right. So a regulation is something which is very, very different from accreditation. Okay. Regulation is to regulate something. For example, the government is trying to regulate the production, the consumption, the disposal of drugs, right? So for that, they have put in a specific act. If it's related to narcotic drugs, it's a Narcotic Drug and Psychotropic Substances Act, NDPS Act. So it's basically an instrument which is mandated by the government, and people are supposed to comply with that. The basic difference between accreditation and regulation is the fact that regulation is punishable. The second difference is that it is mandatory. Okay, so it's got to be enforced. Now, something as simple, I gave you the example of an act, but something as simple as a traffic signal can also be a regulation, because if we break the traffic signal, we are going to be penalized for it. Wearing a helmet can be a regulation, because if we don't wear it, we're going to be penalized for it, right? So anything which is mandatory and for which we are likely to be penalized becomes a regulation. So the organizations have no option but to enforce it. And most of these regulations are with a view of enforcing public accountability. See this last word here? So it's based on minimum standards, inspection, enforcement, and public accountability. So when you say public accountability, what exactly the government is trying to achieve here is that it's trying to give us a regulation to abide by, wherein we are ourselves, accountable for our behavior, which is indirectly going to affect other people. So again, going back to the traffic signal, if we break the traffic signal, we might just cause an accident wherein other people are also involved and jeopardized, right? So, in order for us to be accountable for our action, this regulation has been put into place. Now, I'll give you one more example of a regulation in a healthcare setting. I already gave you the example of a Narcotics Drug Act, but a regulation is also the biomedical waste disposal guidelines, a very important regulation. Now, here I think you can understand the meaning of this word public accountability, isn't it? So, here we are trying to make the public, that is us, healthcare providers, accountable for our actions of disposing and handling biomedical waste. Because if we don't dispose that properly, we are going to spread infection all around, right? So, in order to make us accountable for our action, there are these biomedical waste guidelines, which is mandatory to be enforced and which are also penalized. I think all of us are aware that today, even if you have if there's a small mistake in the disposal of biomedical waste, something as small as a needle in the wrong colored bin, the penalty can go up to about 50,000 rupees or even more, which is a large sum of money. So, why is this stringent regulation? So that we are accountable for our actions, right? So, having said this about regulation, let me move on to accreditation. As opposed to regulation, accreditation is a voluntary activity. This is the most important difference. So you might be realizing that as you look around in the city at all the hospitals, you might be observing that some of the hospitals are accredited, while most of them are still not accredited. The entire numbers of hospitals accredited, if you look up the website, is very, very nominal as compared to the total number of hospitals which exist in the country. And the reason for this is that it's voluntary. So, why would anybody then go in for accreditation in the first place? Any thoughts on that? Anybody wants to share your views on why would anybody go in for accreditation if it is voluntary? See, generally we tend to do something only if it is mandatory, isn't it? For example, there is an exam upcoming, which you have to take, and then we're all set to study. There's no exam, no unit test, we're not studying. Children are not studying, right? That's the general tendency. So then, if you apply this formula to accreditation and say that this is not mandatory, why would the hospitals even want to go in for accreditation? Can you give me a few points on this? Anybody from the audience? It'll be nice if we can have a little bit of interaction rather than having a monologue. For a post lunch session, I might just end up having a few of you going off to sleep. Yes? Anybody? No? Any thoughts on this? Neha ma'am, are they allowed to unmute themselves?
Yes, ma'am, they are allowed. Students,
Okay. So
kindly
please,
respond to madam, or you may write in chat also if you don't want to
yeah,
unmute.
absolutely. Absolutely. You could write
Yeah,
in the chat.
kindly write in a chat at least. Please respond.
I just hope everybody's connected with us. Okay. I don't think. Okay, I can just see a hello in the chat. Okay, so somebody says quality assurance. Okay. All right. So that could be one reason that you're really looking at some kind of quality improvement in your setup when it comes to patient care. Okay. Honestly, if you ask me, uh, in all my years of experience, I think, people would give that the least importance for building trust among patients. Okay. I think that's something I agree to show that we maintain standards. Yes, that's right. So I think it's a very good tool to showcase that particular, competency of ours that, okay, somebody says to cut down the competition. Okay. International acceptance of records. Okay. Mhm. All right. Thank you for the answers. To officially, what is this? Hospitals may go in for accreditation to improve quality and standards. Okay. To officially recognize application of a new standard or a regulation to build quality. Okay. So, my thoughts on this. A, I think the most important thing would be to showcase your competency, right? As somebody has rightly mentioned, there is always competition in anything that we do, anything and everything that we do. There's always stiff competition. So, how do you um, stand by the competition and excel? And how do you have your edge over others? So, this could be one of the tools where you can have your edge over others, right? Um, the other most important thing with why people go in for accreditation today is primarily because of the drive or the market force which has been created by the government, and that is to be able to undertake government schemes. So, see, the government is pretty smart at this, isn't it? Because this is also a government body, so obviously, the government is trying to support both arms. The right hand is also the government's, the left hand is also the government's, right? So the government is obviously trying to support itself by, on one side, trying to inculcate quality in the hospitals, and on the other side, trying to support quality by giving some kind of an incentive. Now, what are these incentives? The first and the most important incentive is the CGHS, ECHS, ESIS schemes, right? So, in order to be able to undertake these schemes, it is mandatory for hospitals to have a minimum of an entry level accreditation. For CGHS, in fact, a full accreditation is necessary, right? So, this is probably the most important reason. The other important reason is the insurance cashless facility. I think that's where 80% of people, uh, drive are driven towards undertaking the NABH accreditation. Because a few years back, it was mandatory that you should be accredited in order to have a cashless facility. But after COVID, things have changed a little. The table has turned, and the government is thinking a little differently. They're also thinking of it from the community standpoint that patients should get a cashless facility in the nearest hospital possible without the hospital being empaneled or without the hospital being accredited. So they've removed that NABH accreditation. However, rates which the hospitals get for cashless facility is still dwindling around the NABH accreditation level. So you have an entry level, you get an X rate, you have a full accreditation. You can negotiate a little for getting a X plus 10 rate, something like that. So the accreditation is just giving an idea to these schemes to have some kind of standardization, because they know that if you're accredited, you will probably use the ICD codings, you'll have some kind of standardized protocols and processes which will make patient care more efficient. And when there's efficiency, it's easier for claims to be settled, the mediclaims to be settled, right? Inefficient care is going to lead to longer stays, bigger bills, more trouble for the insurance companies, uh, large amounts of settlement for the insurance companies, and so on. So this is why they're going in for, this is the biggest driving force for NABH accreditation today. Okay, so I hope I've cleared your doubts as to what is regulation and what is accreditation. So accreditation is something which is totally voluntary. Yes, it helps us to stand out among others in the market, gives us an edge over others, a competitive edge over others, helps us to showcase our competency, and it also helps us to get into this race of getting these government schemes and getting ourselves empaneled to these government schemes. Okay. Now, let me give you a little idea about the vision of, or rather the, what should I say, the hierarchy of the body of NABH. Where does that, stem from? Let me just give you a little bit of idea on that. So there is the body which is QCI, which is the Quality Council of India, which was set up in 1997, which is an autonomous body. And this body was basically set up to establish and operate some kind of an accreditation structure in India. This was the whole aim and objective of establishing this autonomous body. Okay. The vision of this QCI is to be among the world's leading national apex quality facilitation, accreditation, and surveillance organizations to continuously improve the climate systems, processes, and skills. I think these three are the key words: systems, processes, and skills, okay, for total quality. So, with this vision in mind, to be able to implement efficient systems, efficient processes, patient centric processes, and to improve on the skills of the healthcare providers. With this vision in mind, the QCI was established, Quality Council of India was established. Now, the, uh, the structure of this QCI is a whole load of committees which have different roles to play. So you have an accreditation committee, which basically looks at or keeps a track of who is getting accredited, who is applying for accreditation, all those things, allotment of the assessments and all of that. So this is an accreditation committee setting the standards and all of that. There's an appeals committee which deals with appeals that come from hospitals. So some of the hospitals which get rejected might put up their appeals. Assessors may put up their appeals. So anybody putting up an appeal would come to this committee and get addressed. There's a technical committee that deals with all the technical issues. So basically, the entire system now has become portal based. Previously, it was manual. When we used to go for assessments, we would, carry a pad with us, we'd note down points, we would write on a piece of paper what are the non-compliances, and we would hand it over. These days, we are completely portal based. So we go with our mobile phones. We have an app there for an assessor. We use that app and we complete the entire assessment according to the sequence of events, and then it moves on. So I'll come back to that process in the next class more in detail. For now, this technical committee, therefore, has a lot of work to do in terms of, I think they must have started with designing the portal, maintaining the servers and the data, because it's going to be heavy data, right? It's going to be completely pan-India data. So maintaining the data, saving it up, and making the necessary changes, technical changes, giving technical support to the assessors who have some difficulties, giving technical support to hospitals which have technical difficulties. Sometimes you can't submit an application, you can't, enter something in a portal. So many issues keep coming up. So all that troubleshooting is done by this members of this technical committee. Assessor management committee is exclusively for assessors. So there are people who contact us, assessors like me. They contact us. They ask us whether we can go to a particular place on a particular date and conduct an assessment and so on. And they allot the hospital to us. They send us mails. They coordinate the whole thing for us. Things like that. So that's an assessor management committee. The research committee basically looks at all research activities and the ethics committee activities and so on. There is a secretariat, which is primarily the office where you generally call and make your inquiries and get your doubts sorted and all of that. And there are also a panel of assessors who are postgraduate doctors or they are postgraduate nurses who have a wide experience, and they have also completed their assessors program, and they're selected to be a panel to be on the panel of assessors. So this is roughly how the structure of NABH goes. Okay, so in a nutshell, to come back and tell you what accreditation is all about. So this is a sentence, or this is the statement given by NABH itself, that accreditation basically relies on establishing technical competence of healthcare organizations in terms of accreditation standards in delivering services with respect to its scope. It focuses on, very important, the second sentence is very crucial. It focuses on learning, self-development, improved performance, and reduced risk. It is based on standards, professional accountability, and encourages healthcare organizations to pursue continual excellence. Okay, so this is the scope of accreditation. So I want to just elaborate a little on this. Okay, the different areas or the different pockets which the accrediting body focuses on. Most important focus would start with self-development and learning. Because without people being involved in the NABH process, you can't really go ahead. It's not the management just filling in an application, applying for something, and they get something. It's not like that. It's a whole long drawn process where you're trying to get everybody on the same platform to follow certain standardized protocols and processes, right? So when I say everybody, it's ideally supposed to be every single human being in the hospital, right from the consultant to the helpers category. Everybody are supposed to be involved with this. Every department is supposed to be involved with this. There is a constant upgradation which is expected of every single person working in the organization. As the technology advances, as the newer protocols keep coming up, we expect to upgrade ourselves. And that's the kind of self-development we're looking at. Okay. The standards which are set are a kind of a structure. If I just randomly when I run you through the different chapters, you'll probably get a better idea. NABH gives you a very, very broad skeleton, a structure for the entire process. It does not tell you that you should be seeing patients once every 3 hours. You should be doing a reassessment every 5 hours. It doesn't give you any kind of mandates like that or any specifics like that. Barring a few specifics, yes, there are a few, but not every standard. Standards are very broad outlines of what we should be doing when we say we are offering quality care. Okay, so it's just you can say it's an umbrella which they're opening out for you, and you have to gather under the umbrella all your processes and protocols to complete that gamut. Okay, and then you keep stepping up the benchmark. So today, if you're doing something bad, you will try to obviously improve. But if you're doing something good, you don't have to stop with that. You have to make it better. Okay, so that's the whole advantage of going in for NABH accreditation. Now, is NABH the only accrediting body? Well, no, it's not the only accrediting body. There is also JCI, Joint Commission International, which is an international organization, which also has laid down its standards in a very similar manner, but slightly different, maybe a little tougher, more expensive, and there are hardly any hospitals in the country, very few hospitals, which can afford to go in for a JCI accreditation, because it's not only based on international standards, but um, um, it's also the standards cannot be so easily implemented. That's one part, and the entire process itself is very expensive. Okay. Now, there are different upgradations in the standards also. Okay, so I'll just give you a bit of an idea of how these standards are laid out. Tomorrow, I think we can look at the standards more in detail. Yeah. Before I move to that, I again have one question to ask. So, when I'm saying standards, these standards are basically all about policies, processes, procedures, right? So, here I want to ask a question. Is policy, process, and procedure are all synonyms, or are they different? And if they're different, how are they different? Could you just put your answers on the chat box, please? My question is, policy, procedure, process, are all of these different? Are they the same? They're all different. Okay, agreed. Dr. Shobha says they're all different. Agreed. So how are they different? I suppose you're not very sure about the answer, because I can't see any chat messages. No messages in the chat box. Policy is a rule to follow. Okay, agreed. Somebody again confirms that all are different. Yes, all are different. All policies are different. Yes, all policies are different. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So policy, process, procedure, these are completely different things. When you say policy, that's probably on the top at the pyramid. There are not as many policies as there are procedures. There are less number of policies, but these policies come down from the top to the bottom. So they are generally laid out by the management, right? So policies, like you have your government policies, we have our health policy, we have our health and welfare is one of the policies. Maybe there are policies for family planning, there are policies for education. So the government has so many policies, right? Similarly, any organization that lays down a statement of aims and ideals which it wants to follow. Okay, so these are basically guiding principles. So when you want to lay down a process, you would obviously want to implement a policy first, or rather, when you get a policy, that acts as a principle for the rest of the things, that is the processes and the procedures. Okay, the basic plan of action is the policy. All right, so supposing I give you an example of a transfer policy. Okay, So what is the policy in your hospital to transfer any patient? So you might want to give me 10 things under that, or you might just want to put it all in a nutshell and give me just one answer and say that any patient who is to be transferred would first be stabilized. That's the policy, which gives you a wide scope for drafting policy processes and procedures, isn't it? It's just giving you one wide scope, because all you're saying is that any patient that needs to be transferred out would be first stabilized, which means you're not going to transfer a patient who's critical, about to die on the during the transit. You're not going to shift such a patient. You're going to first stabilize the patient, and then you're going to shift the patient. I'll give you another example of a policy. A uniform care policy. Very wide policy again, right? So how can you define that? So a uniform care policy could mean that you give uniform care to all kinds of patients, regardless of their age, their sex, their financial status, their educational background, their religion, their caste, anything. Regardless of that, we give uniform care to our patients. That's the organization's policy, right? So, using this policy as a guiding principle, we are going to then lay down all our processes and protocols. Okay? I'll move straight to a process. I won't confuse you with the protocol. I'll go to process. Now, once you've decided on a policy, a process is a series of tasks and activities which will help you to produce that desired outcome, right? So, as I gave you the example of a transfer policy, I said all patients or only stabilized patients would be transferred. That's the policy of the hospital. So then how do I implement that policy? I would create a process for that policy, right? So that process would involve a series of tasks, which could be starting from the responsibility of a resident medical officer and RMO to stabilize the patient, see to it that his vitals are okay before he's transferred out. It could involve the transport team to be ready. So maybe the ambulance, the EMS team, and all activities with reference to the transport could be one activity. The handover process, after reaching the desired either organization or other place where the patient needs to be transferred, the handover at that place could be your third activity, right? So the entire transfer of a patient has been just broken down into three broad set of tasks and activities, right? Now, in that, you can further break it into smaller parts where you will call it as a procedure, which is literally a step-by-step instruction of how to do a particular task. So broadly, in the process, we said that the RMO first stabilizes the patient. In the procedure, when you're writing out a procedure, you will then say a step-by-step instruction that the RMO is first supposed to check the vitals, then maybe do an ABC assessment or whatever. Then, maybe settle down, start with IV fluids or start with whatever basic medication is required to stabilize the patient, vasopressors, this, that, whatever you want to say. And then finally, the patient is stabilized. So that stabilization of the patient, which was one activity, has now been broken up into several steps, right? Similarly, the transport team, I said. So there you can break it down into several steps by saying, I want to call the team. So this is the number I should dial. What should the ambulance driver be? How should he be responding? Okay, or what should he be doing? right? What should the team do on the way? So they should be keeping a track of, they should be monitoring vitals, they should be monitoring ECG, probably giving oxygen support, whatever, right? During the transit, right? Handover process, who hands over what to whom? The entire set of instructions should be laid out. So this is how you would have a policy based on which a process is laid out and based on which procedures are laid out. Okay. So why I brought this up suddenly in the middle of NABH is because when we say standards, in most of the standards, the accrediting bodies will say that you have to have a policy for this. You have to have a procedure for this. You have to have policies and procedures for this, those kind of things. So the organization should then, or rather, the organization is then expected to create certain policies, to create certain processes and procedures within the organization so that they can implement those policies. Okay. All right. Now, I was talking about the addition. I just started talking about it and then I think I diverted to this. So, generally, every 4 to 5 years, we have a new edition which comes up. And this edition basically talks about some kind of modifications in the standards because with growing times, there are so many things which gain more and more importance, isn't it? So you try to, as we are trying to improve quality within the hospital setting, the NABH also tries to bring hospitals to a higher benchmark, or it tries to create standards which will cater to the newer times, to the newer requirements of the customers, and so on. Right? To give you a simple example, I think before accreditation, patient education or joint decision made by doctor and patient was really not a concept. I mean, I don't remember that concept when I passed out. At that time, it just used to be a one-way traffic, right? The doctor would tell the patient, not ask the patient, tell the patient, you are suffering from this, you require to undergo this surgery. And the patient would be like, yes. Or, of course, no, if it's not possible for the patient. But most of the times, yes. Why? Because the doctors were considered as literally next to God. So any word that comes from the doctor was like, the Bible truth, and they would just accept it. Today, that's not the case. We have educated patients. We have a whole lot of information that's available online for patients and relatives to browse and gather information from. We have a lot of educated patients that come to us. So we should be able to answer their questions, clarify their doubts, explain the procedures to them, explain the diagnosis to them. They are not just going to be, ready to take whatever we say lying down. That's not going to happen. They would do window shopping in 2, 3 hospitals. They would make their own research. They would have their own suggestions and opinions as to what they would prefer to do. They'd have their own preferences and choices as far as the treatment goes. Somebody might say, I want to do it laparoscopically. Somebody might say, I still want to be conventional on the treatment, and so on. Right? So, keeping all this in mind, the standards keep getting upgraded, they keep getting changed. Okay. So, the standards for quality of care that we are now looking at is the 6th edition. So, there is the International Society for Quality in Healthcare, ISQA. Okay, is the one that helps to develop these standards, and the standards for hospitals. The 6th edition is now developed by NABH. It has recently been released or rather released a few months back, but recently been implemented from the 1st of June. And so we try to, reach that benchmark of being able to cater to international standards. That's the constant aim of NABH. Okay. Now, what NABH has done is a major change which NABH has brought about is to encourage smaller hospitals to go into accreditation or to reach the accreditation standards. When NABH initially started, this difference did not exist. There was just one set of standards, and whoever wanted to go in for it would go in for it. But it kind of discouraged the smaller hospitals because it was not at all doable. So invariably, it so happened that only the bigger hospitals went in for these standards. They went in for the accreditation, and the smaller hospitals were nowhere in the picture because it was beyond their reach. But subsequently, a very good change was brought about by NABH. Now, this is also now way back. It's become like a past history now. But just to give you an orientation for those who are not aware of this, the NABH brought up specific standards for small healthcare organizations. Or rather, what they did was to divide organizations into two major groups. One is SHCO, if you can see that on the top, small healthcare organizations. These are organizations having a bed strength between, oh, I'm sorry, not 20 to 50. This would be anything less than 50. Okay. So anything less than 50 would come under small healthcare organization, wherein the set of standards, which we are going to look at tomorrow, are basically the same. I mean, they are still bound into 10 chapters, but the standards and the objective elements, they are less in number. Okay. The chapters are the same, but the standards within the chapters are less, and the objective elements within the standards are even less. So by doing this, I think this was a great move by NABH, because by doing this, they kind of were able to include all the small hospitals into the gamut of accreditation. Today, even a 5-bed hospital, something as small as that, can also go in for a small healthcare organization accreditation if they want to. Again, it's voluntary, there's nothing mandatory about it. So if they want to go in for it, they can go in for it. But at least it's doable today. Okay, and we call this as an entry level, accreditation. So it's a basic accreditation which these small organizations can go in for, and thereafter they can keep renewing the accreditation. So this is an entry level accreditation. Okay. In the same entry level accreditation, there are also some standards for HCOs. So these are healthcare organizations which have a bed strength of more than 50 beds. They can also start with the entry level, and then they can move on to a mid accreditation cycle, and they can finally move on to a full accreditation. Okay, so after entry level, they can go in for something like a pre accreditation, which most people try to skip one level in between. They try to go in straight for a full accreditation, because by the time you get into the cycle of entry level and keep renewing it a couple of times, you're kind of groomed into what exactly is expected from you. So the organizations kind of get a sense of what NABH is expecting from us, or what quality inpatient care is all about. So you get a hang of it, and then you can go in for the full accreditation process. These consist of the same 10 chapters, but the standards are more. And if you see the objective elements, they're almost 3 times more, right? So for a full accreditation, it takes a lot of effort to prepare and to go through the accreditation process, as compared to an entry level, accreditation, because since the number of standards are much less, this is much easier and doable. So just one second, I want to show you something. Yeah, sorry, I didn't put this in my presentation, but I can just show you online. So what I basically wanted to show you is these different, logos that you can see here. So depending on what your organization has achieved, you get these particular, logos on your certificate. Okay. And this is the picture that shows us the three levels of, um, accreditation which the hospital goes through. Oops, so sorry. Okay, it's too small. All right, never mind. I'll show it to you tomorrow. So the entry level pre-accreditation, the full accreditation. So these different levels through which an organization goes is basically pre-decided. The organization decides which ones to choose and then goes ahead with it. Um, you also have the opportunity, in case you're a big organization with a good bandwidth, and you can comfortably go ahead with a full accreditation, you're most welcome to do so. So you can straight away apply for a full accreditation also. But generally people prefer to, or they're advised to go in for an entry level first before you go in for the full accreditation, so that at the end of the entry level you at least have a know-how on what is what. Okay. So I think that's the idea I wanted to give to you today, starting with what is regulation, what is accreditation, how these two are different from each other, what is the system and the structure of NABH, where it stemmed up from, and how they have now divided NABH standards into two parts, that is the small healthcare organization and the healthcare organizations, and how you can go through the entire process in three levels, starting entry level, ending full accreditation. So this was the broad idea I wanted to give to you. Now I think I'm open for questions. In our tomorrow's session, we would be looking broadly at how these 10 chapters are laid out and what is the intent of each chapter. So then you'll realize at the end of it that this whole exercise which NABH is putting us through is all related to quality and safety of patients. Okay. So you can put your questions on the chat box. We'll use these last few minutes to answer your questions. No questions at all? How does accreditation help patients? Yes, very good question. Yes, so I think I mentioned to you how it helps hospitals. I'll mention to you now how it helps patients. So do you have any thoughts on that? Does anybody from the audience has any thoughts on this? In fact, you'd be surprised to know, correct, maybe quality treatment, exactly. In fact, you'll be surprised to know that the patients are the biggest beneficiaries of quality, because A, they get good quality care, B, they get standardized care, because we are focusing on processes and protocols. And when we focus on processes and protocols, it is not patient specific, it becomes process specific. So whether Dr. Parab is treating a patient or Dr. Sarika is treating a patient or anybody else is treating a patient, it will be a standardized protocol for all patients. Okay, so they can be assured of that standardized, efficient process that you're trying to follow. So this is one of the most important things. Besides, they get services by credentialed and privileged medical staff, right? Both nurses as well as doctors, because NABH is very particular about the qualification of doctors and nurses and paramedical staff working within the organization. So you might have observed that gradually these days, people who are unqualified are gradually being laid off and they're being replaced by more and more qualified staff. In fact, the biggest turnover, I think, is with the paramedical staff, where in earlier times, we just used to have 10th and 12th passed out people working as X ray technicians and lab technicians. Today, we have well qualified people who have undergone courses like what Symbiosis is running, BSc Medical Technology, Lab Technology, and Imaging Technology, and all of that. We have qualified staff who are appointed for this. We also have credentialed medical staff in terms of super specialists which are available now. So, for example, if pediatrics was a branch, now we have pediatric surgery, which has stemmed out to be a separate super specialty, and so on. Also, rights of patients are respected. I think I just gave you the example of patient education and how it has become so important today. So, the NABH standards focus a lot on patient rights, patient responsibilities, how to protect their rights, how to educate them. And it also talks about patient satisfaction and regularly evaluating patient satisfaction. So these are the biggest benefits of accreditation to the patients. And ultimately, if you look at it from a commercial standpoint, I think you can say that they would get high quality care at an affordable cost. Because when processes are efficient, recovery is faster, discharge is faster, stay is shorter, cost is less. When you get complications, the stay is longer, more expenses, maybe ICU care is required, and all of those hassles. Same with the hospital also. Benefits to the hospital can also mean less number of medical legal cases because you're treating the patients faster, better, more efficiently. Outcomes are better. So it's more beneficial to patients as well. How about benefits to the staff, since you brought this up? Staff are also definitely benefited. Okay, I have a question here. If hospital is NABH, is there any be it to doctors and other staff? I didn't get your question. Any benefit? Okay. No, there is no benefit to doctors. Benefit in what sense? Benefit in the sense that they are in an environment which is catering to continuous learning. So they get chance for upgradation. They get chance to be in a good working environment. They can have leadership roles, right? They can be an owner of a particular process. They can be sure that there's an overall professional development in them. These are the benefits to the doctors and the staff. When I say staff, I mean everybody: doctors, nurses, paramedics, allied, everybody, clinicians, and everybody. So that's the basic advantage. But commercially, if you're looking at some kind of specific benefits in terms of monetary benefits, no, because that's going to be part of the game. So nobody's going to monetarily benefit you. Okay. Oh, I have a very interesting question here. What's the criteria of NABH for a medical tourism company? Well, there is no criteria as such for a medical tourism company. It's just that when you run a medical tourism company, obviously people coming from abroad are going to look for good hospitals. Now, what's the definition of the word good? Very difficult to define the word good, right? So you can say that, well, my hospital is good because it is NABH accredited. So it just gives you a feather on the cap. That's it. All right. So I think I've answered your questions. Okay, I have one more question here. Will this come under the government? Yes, of course. I just showed you the structure, right? So the Quality Council of India is a very much a government body. It was established by the government for the purpose of accreditation, and NABH is one of the boards which is under the Quality Council of India. There are so many other boards also which come under the Quality Council. For example, NABL, which is for laboratories, right? So that also comes under the QCI. So QCI is the mother parent organization, which is very much government. So I have another question. Why the government isn't making accreditation mandatory? Yes, very good question. I think I am personally of the opinion that the government should make it mandatory, because unless they do, it's not going to be a wholehearted exercise. They Only those who can afford, those who feel it important, are going to go ahead with it, and other hospitals are going to still lay back in the line. So I really feel, and I hope that the government will make it mandatory very soon. I think they will, but there are lots of talks about it. But as of now, no, it's not yet mandatory. Do government hospitals also require NABH? Yes, a very good question again. So I think until recent times, the government was not a part of this entire accreditation process, because I think primarily because of the chaos that they go through with the number of patients and the lack of processes and the lack of material supplies and the lack of staff and all of that. They never were a part of this accreditation process. But of late, now government hospitals have also been encouraged to go through this process. So there are a couple of government hospitals who are now trying to get NABH accredited. In fact, even the medical college hospitals were in the same situation. They were also not getting accreditation. I mean, they were not going in for accreditation, but now the government is encouraging medical college hospitals also to go in for accreditation. So all of these other, groups are also going in for accreditation. Yes, I can see one more question here. What is the difference between NABH and NQAS? So NQAS is basically National Quality Assurance structure or system, I guess. So that's also a set of standards, but it's not specific for hospitals and healthcare organizations. If I understand rightly, I think that's basically a quality assurance um, uh, system, like you say, a quality management system. So it's like a platform, a system that brings quality assurance standards together. NABH is very specific for hospitals and healthcare organizations. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your participation. I'll see you tomorrow, I think in the morning at 10. Thank you. Dr. Sarika, can we wind up? Do I have one more question there? No. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.